Next on Unsolved Mysteries. At a scenic rest area, 2 people are gunned down. The survivor cannot forget the killer's face. In 1973, a spy plane crashes in Vietnam, and the government says the entire crew was killed. But others believe some were captured, held prisoner, and are still alive. In Vancouver, a young woman is found unconscious, a paring knife stuck through her hand with a note reading, "Now you must die." Her husband said it was a horseback riding accident, but it was murder. Now the killer is behind bars, thanks to you. And can touching one of these statues really make a woman pregnant? Some believe these babies are living proof. 5 stories. They're all strange, but guess what? They're all true. I'm Dennis Farina, and this is Unsolved Mysteries. January 27th, 1973. At the Paris peace talks, the United States and North Vietnam formally agreed to an immediate ceasefire. A few American soldiers, however, were sent on a secret mission after that. For them, the war was still going strong. America looked forward to their sons and husbands returning from Vietnam. Many soldiers packed their bags and wrote happy letters about coming home. But at the Ubon Royal Air Base in Thailand, Air Force Sergeant Peter Cressman was writing an angry letter to his congressman.
Dear Sir, on January 27th, I read the headlines which hailed the Peace with Honor Agreement, only to wake the next morning to find my situation the same as the day before, as though nothing had changed in Southeast Asia. I realized that I and others in my unit were in violation of an agreement which I consider to be an order from the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States.
Peter was an expert in electronics who flew top-secret reconnaissance missions. After the ceasefire, his squadron was ordered to operate as if nothing had changed. The letter to his congressman expressed his concerns about violating the Peace with Honor Agreement.
Last night, an NKP mission picked up some short transmissions at 0130.
I went to seek advice at the base legal office. There I was informed of the consequences for refusing to carry out the orders, which I consider to be illegal as well as immoral. These consequences instilled in me a fear which has caused me to abandon any thoughts of refusing to obey these illegal orders.
Are there any questions? Okay, good luck.
1 week after the ceasefire, Peter and 7 other men boarded a surveillance plane codenamed Baron 52.
$1510, check.
The flight plan called for the crew to fly over Laos, a neutral country which borders Vietnam and Cambodia. The assignment was to monitor a column of North Vietnamese tanks, which were moving into Cambodia along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. At 11:05 p.m., Baron 52 departed. 2.5 hours after takeoff, reports came in that the plane was taking heavy ground fire. 5 minutes later, silence. A rescue team located the wreckage of Baron 52 in the jungle deep inside Laos. They only recovered the remains of the co-pilot. Peter Cressman and 6 other men were declared missing in action, including 21-year-old Joseph Matijov. His mother remembers every detail of the day she received the news.
2 military men, an officer and a sergeant, came to the home to inform me that Joe was missing in action, that his plane had been shot down, but there was a possibility that some of the men may have bailed out of the plane. I felt a little feeling of relief because he was missing and not killed. I thought there was some chance that I might see him again. It was 18 days later that they returned, and they informed us that none of the men had gotten out of the plane. There was no way. They were not wearing parachutes. The plane went down into a spin, so they declared them all killed in action.
I'm Sergeant Burrows. This is Colonel Helga.
They said that they did see remains in the plane. The plane had been burned. So we believed him.
Peter Cressman's mother also received word that her son's status was changed to killed in action.
If my government said that he had been killed, then it had to be true, because they wouldn't go around and tell a family that this had happened unless they had positive proof.
Several weeks later, the Air Force sent Peter's belongings to his parents. They found the letter he had written but never mailed to his congressman. In it, Peter described his covert activities. That's when his family started wondering if they were being told the truth.
They were declaring him dead, but there was no body. And we understand bodies can burn up or disappear in combat, but in this case, there was just nothing. And because of the classification of the missions, they never had anything to back up their position.
According to this, the rescue team found one body, and there were no parachutes in the plane.
For 5 frustrating years, the Cressmans tried to get information about Peter's case. The Air Force response was always the same. All members of the crew of Baron 52 were killed in the crash.
Hello?
Then, 5 years later, the Cressmans received a surprising phone call from an attorney with the National MIA organization.
He said, I really don't know how to tell you people this, but there's evidence that I've seen that indicates that at least 4 of the people on your brother's aircraft not only survived the incident, but were captured by North Vietnamese forces.
In 1973, Terrell Menarson was an air defense analyst. His job was to decipher enemy messages.
We saw a specific North Vietnamese communique requesting transportation for captured American bandit pilots. We felt that based on the logistics, based on the lack of American activity, that the only personnel who could have been captured were the ones from Baron 52. There was a good probability some of the crew members had survived, parachutes were missing. So they probably were already in the hands of the Vietnamese and into the prison system.
It was hard for us to believe. I telephoned my husband at work and I told him what I heard, and he immediately said that we would have to make arrangements to go to the Pentagon to pull Joe's file out and to study it ourselves to see just what had really happened.
Mr. and Mrs. Manager,
Yes.
I have these 2 files for you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll be back in a half hour to pick them up.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
When we went to the Pentagon, they showed us Joe's file, and there in the file were copies of the radio intercepts. Much of them were blacked out. There was very little that we could read. But we saw enough evidence in his file to show that the government knew all along that these 4 men had been captured.
The Defense Intelligence Agency does not deny the existence of the North Vietnamese communication. However, the DIA claims that since the nationality of the captured pilots was never mentioned, the prisoners were not the crew of Baron 52. Then, in 1986, a retired intelligence analyst, Jerry Mooney, testified before the Congress that Peter Cressman and Joseph Matejov were prisoners of war, but not in Southeast Asia. He claimed they had been transported to the Soviet Union. Terrell Menarson agrees.
Special types of prisoners, in other words, prisoners with special knowledge, special experience, were being rounded up throughout the various prisoner war camps throughout North Vietnam and sent to Hanoi to be turned over to the Russians for exploitation. I had information stating that they had been flown out to the Sokol area.
There is no concrete evidence that the POWs were transported to Russia during the Vietnam conflict. Russia agreed to search through their prisons, but said they found no trace of the men. One question continues to haunt the families. If the government knew that their sons had been captured, why was their status changed to killed in action? According to Mrs. Matijoff, the answer can be found at the Paris peace talks.
My husband made arrangements to meet with Dr. Roger Shields, the Assistant Secretary of Defense at the Paris peace talks. Dr. Shields told us that he was ordered to cross off the name of these 4 men from a list of known live captured Americans and write over them killed in action. This plane was flying after the peace treaty was signed, therefore it was breaking the peace treaty. It was a covert operation, and at that time we said we were not at war, but we were having a secret war and there was secret bombing going on. But we couldn't admit to that, so the only thing they could do was just wipe these men out as if they never existed, and that's what they did. So he was actually killed on paper at the Paris peace talks.
Roger Shields declined to appear on camera. However, in a telephone conversation with Unsolved Mysteries, he stated that he was never ordered to cross off their names. He said that he never had the authority to make a status change. However, he did acknowledge that Mrs. Matijoff has, quote, every reason on earth to wonder if her son might still be alive.
A man puts on a uniform to serve his country should be brought back once he serves and brought back to his loved ones. So I like to speak out about that. Make sure, whatever you do, that you never let this happen again. God forbid there should ever be another war and other men forgotten.
We didn't expect this kind of thing from the government, to be perfectly honest. If something goes wrong in your family, you do what you can to straighten it out. You admit to what the problem is. And obviously, I don't believe they've admitted to this day what the problem is.
The Air Force and Defense Intelligence Agency continue to state that there is absolutely no proof that any of the men aboard Baron 52 were captured. In 1996, the 8 crew members were honored at Arlington National Cemetery. Next, a woman claims someone is trying to kill her. Police are skeptical until she's found dead. Richmond, British Columbia.
The body of the blonde woman was clothed in brown slacks, a pink blouse, and shoes. The 44-year-old...
This quiet Vancouver suburb is shocked when a body is found lying in the yard of an abandoned house.
The hands were behind her back, strapped to her feet, tied to her feet with a rope or a cord.
The victim is a 44-year-old nurse, Cindy James. She's been drugged and strangled, her hands and feet tied behind her back. But somehow, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police believe that Cindy's death was either an accident or a suicide.
In the 7 years before she died, Cindy reported nearly 100 incidents of harassment, and 5 were violent physical attacks. Over time, the police began to doubt her stories, but Cindy's parents have never doubted that their daughter was murdered.
4 months after Cindy James separated from her husband, the phone calls began.
Hello? Who is this?
She said it was just a voice. Sometimes it would change the sound, and sometimes it was just whispering. Sometimes it was just nothing, just silence. As far as we know, she did not recognize the voice.
Of course, I think we should add a qualifier there that she was very, very reluctant to talk about this right to the end. And our feeling was that she was withholding something extremely vital.
Cindy reported the threatening calls to Vancouver police, who began an investigation. Over the next 3 months, she said the harassment got worse. At night, she heard prowlers. Her porch lights were smashed. Her phone lines severed. Bizarre cut and paste notes began to appear on her doorstep.
And she told me many times that he wanted to scare her to death. She said, he doesn't want to kill me, he wants to scare me to death.
One night, Agnes Woodcock dropped by Cindy's house for a visit.
Cindy? I went up and knocked on the door. There was no answer. I assumed she was having her bath. She did every night. And I thought I heard something. I wasn't sure what it was.
Cindy, what happened?
I found her crunched down with a nylon tied tightly around her neck. Cindy said she'd gone out to the garage to get a box, and someone grabbed her from behind. All she saw was white sneakers.
Cindy moved to a new house, painted her car, and changed her last name. She also hired a private investigator, Ozzie Caban. The police continued their investigation and questioned Cindy several times.
You live in the city of Vancouver.
Yes.
She wouldn't tell him the entire story. She would be evasive. She would withhold information. And she simply would not act as a normal victim would act. And I can see where a police officer would have a tremendous amount of problem in believing her story.
Cindy told me that after she was attacked, the knife was held at her throat, and she was told that if you talk, your sister will be next, and then your mother. So just keep quiet, don't tell anything.
One night, Ozzie Caban heard strange sounds coming over a two-way radio he had given Cindy. He went straight to her home.
I went around the house, and the house was locked. I was able to look into the house through a window, and I found Cindy lying there.
101 to base. Get me the police. Cindy, can you hear me?
I took a look at her, and I thought she was dead. There was a note that was pinned with a paring knife through her hand. I went to the telephone, called 911. Within about 2 minutes, she revived briefly, and then they took her to the hospital. She told me that she noticed a man coming through the gate. The next thing she remembers is being hit on the side of the head with a piece of wood or something of that nature. She then remembered being held down on the floor, and she remembered a needle going into her arm.
But to some, this incident and all of her stories of harassment seems suspicious.
There was no sighting of a suspect. There was never a fingerprint from a suspect. There was no independent corroboration. Cindy saw this person, or sometimes she said there was 2, sometimes 3 people. $1.5 million, it's been estimated, police spent investigating Cindy James' complaints, more than 100 incidents, and they could never find a suspect.
Hello?
Cindy said the threatening phone calls continued.
Why are you doing this to me?
The police said the calls were too short to trace.
They had 24-hour surveillance on her house for like days on end with up to 14 officers. But never, when surveillance was on her house, never any event would happen. As soon as surveillance was taken off, of course, then she'd get another incident that happened.
When the police were watching the house, we would say to them, well, you know, if it's somebody doing that, sure as heck he knows you're there. And of course, nobody will do anything while you're sitting there and watching.
Then, Cindy was found dazed and semi-conscious, lying in this ditch 6 miles from her home. She was wearing a man's work boot and glove and suffering from hypothermia. Cuts and bruises covered her body. A black nylon stocking had been tied tightly around her neck. Cindy said that she had no recollection of what happened. The police came up with a shocking theory. Cindy somehow was attacking herself.
The police did not investigate the possibility of homicide, of somebody murdering her, but zeroed in on trying to prove that she committed suicide.
Cindy started asking Agnes and her husband Tom to spend the night. On one occasion, she woke them up.
Cindy came running to the door and said, "Tom, I heard a noise downstairs." And Tom, he said, "I heard it too. It was like a loud thump."
Something's burning.
Agnes and Tom went downstairs. The basement was in flames.
So I ran to the phone, and the phone was dead. So Tom went outside and called the neighbor and asked if he would call the fire department. And when he went out, there was a man standing on the curb, and Tom asked him, and he ran away down the street.
Once again, the police suspected that Cindy staged the incident.
There was no dust or fingerprints disturbed on the outside of the windowsill, but somebody set the fires from inside the home, and we had to climb through that window. Now, that should have been one sign. Also, she said she was out walking her dog late at night that night. Now, if somebody was attacked, why would they go out alone walking their dog at 3 o'clock in the morning? Does that make sense?
Finally, Cindy's doctor committed her to a local psychiatric ward. He believed her, but he was also afraid that she was becoming suicidal.
I think one of the things that she found most difficult was that people didn't believe her. She was always doubted. She knew she was doubted, and that was what slowly drove her crazy, the fact that she wasn't believed.
10 weeks later, Cindy left the hospital. She finally admitted to her family and her friends that she knew more than she was saying.
She told me for the first time she was convinced who the perpetrator was. And in her own words, if the police can't solve this, I'll solve it for them.
She said, "When it's all over, I'll explain everything to you, but I can't tell you now."
6 years after the first threatening phone call, Cindy James disappeared. On the same day, her car was found in a neighborhood parking lot. Inside were groceries and a wrapped gift. There was blood on the driver's side door, and items from Cindy's wallet were under the car. 2 weeks later, her body was found at the abandoned house. It looked like Cindy James had been brutally murdered. Her hands and feet were bound together behind her back. A black nylon stocking was tied tightly around her neck. Yet, an autopsy revealed that Cindy died from an overdose of morphine and other drugs. Police concluded that Cindy committed suicide.
There is no way that she could have been able, after ingesting that amount of drugs, to tie herself up. There was absolutely nothing at the crime scene to indicate that she had used any form of syringe or she had used any drinking device or anything of that nature.
The morphine wouldn't have taken effect for, say, 15 minutes, half an hour. The knot specialist who came in and recreated the same type of knots and the way she was tied up, it took him 3 minutes.
In Vancouver, the coroner ruled that Cindy's death was not a suicide, an accident, or murder. They determined that she died of an unknown event. Cindy's family, however, believes there's someone in Vancouver who's getting away with murder. Next, a young couple's romantic horseback ride ends in tragedy. An accident or murder? In the distant past, women thought these statues brought fertility. Some believe the figures still work their magic today. Pittsford, Michigan. We recently broadcast the story about newlyweds Dave Davis and his wife, Shannon. One day, while they were horseback riding, Davis claimed that Shannon lost control of her horse, fell, and struck her head. Shannon was pronounced dead when she arrived at the hospital. A few days later, Shannon's parents found out that Davis had taken out 6 life insurance policies on their daughter. They had Shannon's body exhumed. The autopsy confirmed traces of an animal tranquilizer in her system, as well as 2 injection marks, one on her wrist and one on her shoulder. Police found out that Davis belonged to a hunting group that had access to animal tranquilizers. By the time police moved in to make an arrest, Davis had fled.
FBI and different ones said don't discount the fact that he may already be dead, but we felt like, no, he's out there someplace. He was a rugged outdoors individual. He was a survivor.
Update. American Samoa, 2,000 miles south of Hawaii. Within days of our broadcast, a viewer identified Davis as a man named David Meyer Bell, who was living on this small remote island half a world away. Davis, alias Bell, was arrested 3 days later.
Any comment on the charges against you, Mr. Davis?
I didn't do it.
Police say your wife was poisoned.
I didn't do it.
Police learned that Davis had settled on the island after marrying a 20-year-old Samoan woman. He told her that his first wife died in a tragic accident. Before that, he lived in Florida, Haiti, and Alaska. Davis was found guilty of first-degree murder. He received a life sentence without parole. He will spend the rest of his days at Marquette Branch Prison in Michigan.
Our next story features a pair of statues from a remote village in West Africa. Some say they have a mysterious power, a positive, life-giving force that can create a miracle. Others say that it's nothing more than the power of suggestion. See what you think.
They came from a small village on the Ivory Coast, north of the Gulf of Guinea. To a local tribe called the Bale, these rare statues possess an amazing and awe-inspiring force. It is the power of fertility.
Cannibals. Yes, cannibals. People eat.
In 1994, Edward Meyer was searching the world for artifacts bizarre enough to add to Ripley's Believe It or Not. He found these statues in a small curio shop.
So how do they work? Well, the shaman blesses the statues. And then it is believed if you place them in a doorway facing each other, when the woman walks through and touches them, she will become with child.
Now I put this one on the other side.
Meyer brought the statues back, and as a joke, he put them in a doorway where they could do their best work.
You shouldn't have touched her, you know, you're gonna get pregnant.
Oh dear, I have to send a memo out to everybody in the office so nobody else gets pregnant.
But what began as a joke quickly took on a life of its own.
Within a few weeks, our receptionist was pregnant, and she was the person closest to him, basically had to pass them more than anybody else, and she got teased unmercifully. I mean, oh, Lucy touched the statues, you know, it must work, it must work. And then along came Kimberly.
I had just recently gotten married, so my husband and I had made the decision that we didn't want to start a family for about 3 or 4 years. And once I was told the history of the statues, I had made the decision myself that I wanted to try and stay as far away from them as possible.
But for Kimberly, there was no escaping the statue's seductive powers.
I was walking down the hall, and I tripped along the base of the female statue. Looked down, and my hand was resting on the baby. Thought at that time the damage had been done. Couldn't do anything about it then, so I just went along about my business. A month and a half later, I found out I was pregnant. Should not have gotten pregnant. Definitely, I was practicing birth control at the time, so it was definitely a surprise, but it was a wonderful surprise, as you can see.
In 13 months, 13 women who came in contact with the statues became pregnant, including 3 of the 10 women who worked in the office. As the word spread, strangers came in off the street to touch the statues.
The demand to see them became too great for us to handle in this office. We just weren't prepared for people phoning at all hours of the day, wanting to come and touch a statue. We decided to put them in our local museum in Orlando and let people come for free.
Why don't you touch the baby?
Baby?
Nancy McCaffrey gave it a try.
Both hands?
It was just funny. I got a little nervous. Didn't know exactly where to touch the statue or how to touch the statue, so we giggled our way through it, but I was really hoping that it would work.
2 weeks later, Nancy was pregnant.
I really think they did have something to do with it. I don't know how, I don't know why, but it's just a little too ironic for me.
So far, Ripley's has received postcards confirming nearly 1,000 pregnancies.
I think you find, if you talk to any one of those, you'll find that they believe these statues had something to do with their pregnancy. Maybe that's, the power of suggestion, but it's their power. They believe it.
Perhaps it is the power of suggestion. Or could it be the power of the statues? Either way, as a result, a lot of babies have been born. When we return, a late night, a cold-blooded killer, a scenic rest stop, a recipe for murder. Blind River, Ontario, Canada. On the morning of June 28, 1991, Gord and Jackie McAllister of Lindsay, Ontario, were the only two people in the Blind River rest stop. At 12:55 a.m., they were sleeping peacefully.
This is the police. You gotta move this thing. What?
Yes. Oh my God!
I'm gonna rob you, then I'm gonna kill you.
Oh God!
The intruder was armed with a .22 caliber rifle and a 20-gauge shotgun.
Please don't hurt us. We won't tell anybody. No, please, please.
She fell, and I made a leap to get out. I rolled underneath the motorhome, and I noticed that another car had driven in to the rest area, and this guy got out and was standing beside the car.
Is that a problem, buddy? No, not at all.
29-year-old Brian Major got back in his car, but there was no escape.
And I was laying there just praying to God that he'd keep on running. And he did. As soon as he went by, I rolled back out and got up into our motorhome and drove out onto the highway. I knew I had to get out onto the highway to get some help.
Buddy, you all right? You gotta help me. My wife and I have been shot. Can you use your CB and call for help, please? My radio's broke, but
It was too late. Gord's wife, Jackie, was already dead. The gunman's other victim, Brian Major, also died at the scene. He left behind a wife and a young son. When Ontario papers published a drawing of the gunman based on Gord's description, a witness came forward. He said that a few minutes after 1 a.m. on the night of the murders, a blue van peeled out of the Blind River rest stop and headed straight towards his car. The van continued dead east towards Sudbury, Ontario. The witness didn't notice if it had Canadian or U.S. plates. Police checked out more than 3,500 blue vans on both sides of the border. They found nothing.
The fortunate situation here is that we do have a survivor. Gord McAllister survived his wounds, and hopefully he can point out the killer someday.
Gordon looked through hundreds of mugshots, no leads. Then the police turned to computer technology, hoping to improve on the original rough sketch of the killer.
No.
For hours, Gord tried to match features from the computer's files with his memory.
That's pretty quick. Go back.
The face of the killer finally emerged.
I'll never forget his face. It wasn't a robbery gone bad. There was no resistance to this guy.
Oh, no, please.
He just simply was going to kill somebody. For no reason.
The murderer of Jackie McAllister and Brian Major is believed to be about 5 feet 10 inches tall with a slight build. He has long, stringy blonde hair and a receding hairline. Police say one weapon he used was a 20-gauge shotgun firing #3 buckshot. The other was either a .22 caliber semi-automatic Lakefield Mossberg or a Winchester Cooey. If you have any information, please log on to our website at unsolved.com. Next, an American GI gives a refugee family a Christmas they'll never forget.
During World War II, an American GI named Philip gave a little girl and her refugee family the food and help they needed to survive. When they moved to America, they vowed to find him and thank him for a Christmas they'll never forget.
May 1945. Carl Dente and his family flee from Budapest, one step away from the guns of the Red Army.
The Russian army just a few miles behind us. So I have only one thing in my mind, just to get the family with me out from there. You know, it's a very strange feeling when you leave a country when you was born. But thousand family was leaving, just leave everything behind, just running away.
After their dangerous journey, they find themselves in a refugee camp in Austria, near a town that is occupied by the Americans. As winter sets in, the family is forced to live in a boxcar. Despite their hardships, Carl and his wife, Teresa, managed to survive and provide a shelter for their 5-year-old daughter, Brigitte.
The winter coming, we have a tough time to get food. We have no clothing. We have no other place to go. One thing I was very happy, my family never was complaining.
A few days before Christmas, an American soldier named Philip comes to meet Brigitte's parents. He met their daughter at her American-run school.
I want to take Brigitte to a Christmas party. Christmas, ho, 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 Santa Claus, right.
Philip invites Brigitte to a Christmas party given for the refugee children by the American occupation force.
Okay.
Brigitte? Oh.
Carl manages to find some fabric, and Teresa creates a party dress for their daughter.
She never experienced any Christmas party before. And after living already so long in a little freight car, hardly anything, you know, hardly any food. So it was a big gift for us to knowing how happy she will be. And she was happy.
All right, you ready?
He looked very, very handsome, like a Prince Charming. And I remember that shiny U.S. button on his lapel. Philip made me feel very, very special. Instead of making me feel safe and happy, he made me feel like a big girl.
To Brigitte, it seems like only yesterday.
There was lights and music and a very happy atmosphere. Well, I felt like a princess. I felt like I was in a dream. I never wanted the dream to end.
Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas!
When they coming back from the Christmas party, we have just like a little celebration. Bridget started opening her present. We was very happy, you know, to see our little daughter so happy. After the war started, that was the first Christmas we have a little happy time with somebody because of Philip. It's a memory, you never forget it. We have a difficult time to communicate, but he was so friendly. You know, we have a lot of laughing, a lot of good time. We was happy that night. We never expected him to coming back. We thought so Christmas party over and, you know, we have a beautiful memory at the end of it.
But Philip did come back. He brought candy for the kids and food and supplies for all the families. Then one day in early January, Philip showed up to say goodbye.
I came to tell you I'm leaving.
Soon?
Yes. I want you to have this to remember me by.
Thank you.
His unit was being transferred to France.
He's very sorry he have to leave. He gave us his photograph. He gave us his address. I was wondering we gonna ever see him again. It's just like you leave part of the family.
The Dentes eventually came to America. Teresa passed away and they lost all their possessions. But they managed to hold on to the picture of their friend, Philip. Update. Within an hour of our broadcast, Pauline Dufty of Augusta, Maine, identified the man named Philip as her cousin, Philip Pelletier. Philip is a retired postal worker and now lives in Hammond, Indiana. We helped arrange a reunion.
Bridget?
Yes, Philip?
Oh, yes. Oh, I can't believe it. Hi, Bridget. We're gonna stay in touch. We're gonna try to visit each other as much as possible. We're gonna renew the friendship what we had before. You know, it's a friendship forever.
During that very special afternoon, their friendship was rekindled and renewed. The hardships and dangers of refugee life and the passage of a half a century could not dim their memories. Carl was finally able to say thank you to the kind-hearted GI who gave his family the gift of hope.